Dear colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to take part in this conference. Following Dr. Zelinsky's paper on Eumenes I, my presentation turns to a later ruler of Pergamon, Eumenes II, and to his speech before the Roman Senate in early 172 BC, a speech that played a significant role in the outbreak of the Third Macedonian War. Do you see changing of the slides?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. This slide outlines the structure of the presentation. Particular attention will be given to differences in the composition of the speech and its content, as well as to the question of Thrace. This map is provided for general orientation only. Ancient Macedonia was located primarily within the territory of modern Greece rather than that of the modern state of North Macedonia, and partly within the southwestern Bulgaria. At that time, Pergamon, owing largely to Roman support, controlled vast territories in Asia Minor, as well as a small part of the Balkans. By way of introduction, the speech delivered by Eumenes II, King of Pergamon, before the Roman Senate, played an important role in shaping Roman policy in the Balkans. In this speech, Eumenes presented a series of accusations against Perseus, kings of Macedonia. Roman diplomacy largely accepted these acquisitions, supplemented them with additional charges, and subsequently used them as grounds for declaring the Third Macedonian War. Modern reconstructions of Eumenes' speech rely primarily on two extant accounts, those of Livy and Appian. Although these sources are frequently cited in discussions of the causes of the war, the differences between them have received comparatively little scholarly attention. Polybius' account, probably their common source, survives only in fragments, and it remains unclear how closely either version followed it. Other ancient authors, such as Valerius Maximus and Plutarch, merely note the existence of the speech. The two extant versions of Eumenes' speech share many features, particularly in their thematic content and in the specific charges brought against Perseus. At the same time, however, important differences can also be observed between them. In terms of structure, Livy begins with a prelude emphasizing the hostile intentions toward Rome that Perseus had inherited from his father, Philip V. The narrative then highlights Perseus' personal qualities, his influence in Greece, his strategically significant royal marriages, as well as the vast resources he had amassed for war. Livy then details the specific accusations attributed directly to Eumenes that Perseus did not confine himself within the borders of Macedonia, that he acted against Roman friends and allies, namely Abrupolis and Artetaurus, that he eliminated envoys sent by the Boeotians to Rome, that he campaigned against Duopia, that he invaded Thessaly and Doris, and that he provoked unrest in Thessaly and Perrhaebia. Although considerably shorter, Appian's account follows a broadly similar structure. It addresses Perseus' hostility towards Rome, his effort to gain popularity and sow division in Greece, his actions against the friends and allies of the Romans, namely Abrupolis and Artetaurus, his strategic marriages, and his personal qualities. Despite these shared elements, A closer examination of the details reveals notable discrepancies. Some concern the arrangement of the acquisitions and do not substantially alter the historical meaning. For example, Livy presents Perseus' personal qualities at the beginning of the speech, whereas Appian places them at the end. I try to present this on this slide. Other acquisitions found in Livy are entirely absent from Appian. The assassination of the Theban leaders, the campaign against Duopia, and the invasion of Thessaly and Doris. A far more significant divergence concerns the motivation attributed to Eumenes for delivering the speech. Livy presents his visit to Rome as an act of allied duty, with Eumenes seeking to warn the Senate of Perseus' intentions. Appian, by contrast, offers a different interpretation, centered not on Roman security, but on Eumenes' personal animosity. He explicitly concludes that the Pergamon king was motivated more by jealousy, envy, and fear than by the objective validity of the acquisitions themselves. This divergence likely reflects the author's differing historiographical approaches. Livy aimed at dramatic effect, whereas Appian favored conciseness. It remains unclear, however, which author adhered more closely to the original structure of the speech. On this slide, I'm presenting some uses in this regard. The material discussed so far is also relevant to the history of the Thracians and to Perseus' policy towards Thrace. Both sources address three matters pertinent to Thracian history: Thrace itself, Abrupolis, and the Byzantines. Regarding Abrupolis, the accounts of Livy and Appian are in close agreement. This figure has already been the subject of careful scholarly analysis, to which little can persistently be added. As for the Byzantines, Livy states that Perseus came to their aid, whereas Appian includes them among the peoples with whom he formed alliances, two claims that are not mutually exclusive. According to Livy, Eumenes discussed Perseus' military preparations and his stockpiling of weapons, noting that even if Macedonia's domestic military manpower proved insufficient for his grand ambitions, he had Thrace subjected to him, from which he called drew as if from an everlasting spring. Here, Thrace is presented as a vital source of military recruits, reinforcing Livy's earlier remarks concerning Macedonia's abundant manpower following a prolonged period of peace. The phrase subjected Thrace implies some form of Macedonian influence or control, through its precise extent remains unclear. In Appian's account, however, Perseus is accused of conquering Thrace, a great base of operations. The form κατακτώτου presents the conquest of Thrace as an ongoing process rather than a completed achievement, thereby suggesting that the subjection of the region had not yet been accomplished at the time of the speech. When it comes to Thrace, the accounts of Livy and Appian differ in four main ways shown on this slide. First, they present the status of Thrace differently. In Livy, it already appears to be under Macedonian control, whereas in Appian, it's still in the process of being conquered. Second, this creates a difference in verbal aspect. Livy describes a complete and static possession, while Appian presents an ongoing and dynamic expansion. Third, the two authors place different emphasis on Thrace itself, either as a source of military manpower or as a strategically important region. Finally, these differences affect interpretation. In Livy, Thrace mainly reinforces the idea of Macedonia's military strength, whereas in Appian it may point to broader ambitions, expanding beyond Macedonia. In conclusion, it may be argued that Eumenes' speech undoubtedly drew attention to Perseus' operations in Thrace, although the full picture cannot be reconstructed from the surviving text alone. As already noted, the Romans accepted some of these acquisitions and added new ones, which are likewise preserved in both Livy and Appian. According to Livy, these were set forth by Quintus Marcius Philippus before Perseus himself, and the Macedonian king responded to them. In this exchange, Thrace is not mentioned. In Appian, however, the participants in this exchange differ. Rather than the individuals named by Livy, the two sides are represented by Roman senators and Macedonian envoys. Among the acquisitions advanced by the Romans is the charge above all that he was conquering Thrace. Appian's narrative thus preserves a striking consistency between the acquisitions attributed to Eumenes II and those subsequently advanced by the Romans, with the same verbal form appearing in both contexts. This may suggest that Appian offers a more internally coherent representation of the Thracian question, notwithstanding the fact that he is the later source. Such internal coherence, however, needs not imply greater historical accuracy, since it may equally result from later historiographical condensation or authorial reconstructions. Here is a very brief list of references consulted in preparing this paper. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your